Hey everyone, today we're going to look at sending custom events to GA4 using Google Tag Manager. Specifically, we're going to look at putting a custom event on form submissions on our website. So whenever somebody submits a form, passes validation, they've input the correct fields, it's going to send an event to Google Tag Manager, which we are then going to fire off a tag to Google Analytics. Other custom events you may want to use for when people interact with your chat widget, for if somebody interacts with the FAQ module, the list goes on and on. So let's jump over to Google Tag Manager and we'll get started. Okay, so now that we're in Google Tag Manager, the first thing we need to do is set up some sort of event listener for whenever this form is successfully filled out. Now, we're using Gravity Forms on this website, so I took a look at their documentation and I found this G-form confirmation loaded event, which is triggered whenever the form is completed. And I've modified it, so I've just copied this and modified it to work with Google Tag Manager. Now, this is a little dev heavy, but you could either put this into your website's code base, or you could do what I'm doing, which is just basically going to use Google Tag Manager to inject this tag onto the page. So we're going to call it Gravity Forms Submit Event Listener. And fair warning, this is a little dev heavy. It's going to be a custom HTML. And then here's the script that I've modified. So basically, whenever the confirmation loaded event triggers, it's going to interact with this window.data layer. Window.data layer, this data layer, is basically created whenever Google Tag Manager is initialized on the page. And so basically, we can just push events to it, and then we can create tags and triggers off of those events. So we've created this script, and we want it to load on every single page. So I'm going to say triggers all pages, and hit save. Okay, so now this tag is going to load on every single page. And what we're going to do next is actually create a trigger for whenever an event with form submission is sent to the data layer. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a trigger that's going to basically be listening for whenever form submission, that event is pushed to the data layer. So let's head over to triggers. Let's click on new. Let's call this, we'll keep it generic because the event name is generic, form submit trigger. And we're going to be looking for a custom event, and it is called form submission. And if you wanted to, we're going to say all custom events, but if you wanted to, you could say some custom events, and you could filter this down to page path. And you could say, so if I wanted to, for example, only want to listen for whenever form submission is sent on the contact us page, I could put a filter here for contact us. But for right now, let's just keep it very generic and just leave it as anytime a form submission event is added to the data layer. Hit save. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is add our GA4 tag that's basically going to be triggered off of this form submit trigger, or it's going to fire off of this form submit trigger. First thing we're going to do is go over to the tag section, and we are going to click on new tag. So we're going to call this GA4 form submit. Leave it. No, it's called GA4 form submit. You can, whatever your naming convention, you can name it whatever you want. Tag configuration is going to be a GA4 event. We are going to call this, let's just call it form submit. And we're going to use underscores to keep with the GA4 naming convention. And then the event parameters, we'll get to event parameters in a second. It's kind of a more advanced topic. And then triggering, we're going to go ahead and trigger off of our form submit trigger that we just added. So let's go ahead and hit save. Oh, don't forget to select your configuration tag. So I'm going to choose our main configuration tag, hit save. Okay, everything should be in place. So let's go ahead and preview this and see if it works like it should. So let's use the Google Tag Manager preview feature. I'm going to hit preview here. I'm then going to copy the URL of our contact us page. Go ahead and connect that. And then we can go switch over to Google Tag Manager, and we can see all the tags that have fired on the contact us page and the ones that have not fired. So if I come over here and fill out the form, say test message for right now, move this out of the way, hit let's get started, and then go over Tag Assistant. You can see now the GA form submit tag has actually fired on our contact us page. So everything looks good. So now we can actually go over and use the analytics debug tool as well to see that if the event is coming into GA4. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to GA4, and I'm going to go to admin debug view. And there you go. You can actually see, you can actually see, since I'm already running the debugger tool up here, the debug extension, here's our form submit. Everything looks good. And the next step is if you want to send the form ID. So let's say you've got, I don't know, a couple hundred forms on your website, and you want to be able to filter down to see which form is receiving the most submissions. The easy way to do that is to send some sort of unique identifier attached to that form event. So what we'll do is we'll add the form ID and send that along with this event. So let's head back over to the tag section in GTM and take a look at that event listener that we set up in the very first step. If we open that up, you'll notice within the code, I'm actually sending along this Gravity form ID along with the event name. And this Gravity form ID corresponds to the form ID, which the Gravity Forms library is providing us in this function. So what we want to do is capture this Gravity form ID within Google Tag Manager and then send it along with whatever tags we want it to go along with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this Gravity form ID, and I'm going to create a new data layer variable. And so we're going to click on variables in Google Tag Manager, and under user defined variables, we're going to click on new. I'm going to call this data layer DLV and Gravity form ID. That's just the naming convention I use. You can use whichever one you want. Underneath configuration, this is a data layer variable. And then I'm going to paste in the name that we're sending to the data layer. And then hit save. And that's all you have to do. So now we have a new data layer variable set up that we can then add to whatever tags we want to. So I want to add this to our GA4 event tag. So I'm going to head over to tags. And I'm going to click on GA4 form submit, and then expand this out. And I want to expand out event parameters, and I want to add a new event parameter sent along to GA4 whenever this is submitted. So let's call this Gravity form ID. And then underneath the value, let's click on this little icon here and select our new data layer variable. Go ahead and click on save. And then let's go ahead and submit this. And I'm going to say adding Gravity form submit events tags. And I'm going to publish. And the very last step is going to be to test everything out. Okay, so now that I've submitted everything in Google Tag Manager, the very last step is I want to test everything out to make sure that it's working correctly. So I'm going to use two different tools. I'm going to use this tool called Observe Point, this extension, Chrome extension, that will add this Observe Point tab to your Chrome DevTools. Then I'm also just going to use the GA4 debug view. So I'm going to go to the Contact Us page, and I'm going to go ahead and just add in some information to the fields. And I'm going to clear out Observe Point, making sure to hit this little record button so we capture all the events and that it doesn't get cleared out if any sort of navigation happens. And I'm going to hit Let's Get Started. Then once the form is submitted, we see a new GA4 event. If we scroll down, you can see the name is form submit and the Gravity form ID that's being sent along with it is 1. That looks great. Let's head over to GA4, take a look at the debug view, and here's our new form submit event. Looks great. And you can see Gravity form ID is being sent along with it. So everything looks great. The event's being sent correctly. The very last step is that we want to actually add this as a custom dimension in GA4 that we can then use in our reporting. So I'm going to click on admin, or actually I've already got admin open. I'm going to scroll up to custom definitions. I'm going to click on create custom dimensions, and I'm going to call this Gravity form ID. And then I'm going to copy in the event parameter of Gravity form ID, click save. And that's pretty much it. So now if you go into explorations and you click on dimension on the dimensions tab and you go up top and you click on Custom, you'll see Gravity Form ID. It may take a little bit of time. You might want to give it like 12 hours, but it should show up pretty shortly. That is about it. I know that's a very dev heavy discussion. One other thing I wanted to mention is if you are using React, there's a really good React library called React GTM module. You can go over to their GitHub pages and find information on how to work within if you're using React or Next or whatnot. You can use this for initializing GTM and then also sending custom events. I think that about wraps it up. I will probably have a video next week on actually sending these events from the back end and how you can tie that into the client ID and the session ID to basically keep all events tied directly to a user and then their specific sessions. So if that sounds interesting, just let me know and I'll create that video and post it next week. Thank you very much.